welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and we do sewing things here. I'm really glad that you're here today because it is just the worst kind of rainy, dreary day that just makes you want to stay inside and do some sewing. So today we are going to be starting a new time period. So really excited to do some 1910s Titanic era things. As always, when getting into a new time period, the first thing that we have to do is get all of the appropriate undergarments to give our body the right shape and provide the right foundation to kind of build all the other layers on top of. So that means that today we are going to be making a corset and a pair of split drawers. So the corset is going to be the Rilla Corset by Scroop Patterns, and I will put a link for that pattern in the description below. This is the corset pattern that I think a lot of people when they're first getting into this time period do, because it's just a really well-made pattern and it's really easy to make. It's an underbust pattern, and then it just kind of it's very natural, just kind of smooths out the rest of your body and creates that nice smooth columnar shape from this period. Then for the pair of split drawers, this is basically what is replacing the chemise from earlier time periods. So we still need some layer that goes in between our body and the corset, just for comfort and for cleanliness and all of that. So this is a garment that's kind of like a modern day romper. So it's like a pair of shorts, that's the split drawers part, and then a top part. And with the sort of difference being that the crotch area of the drawers is open so that you don't have to take off all of the layers to do your necessary business. And for that, I am using a period drafting method, so drafting it myself from my measurements. And I started this project over a year ago, got really frustrated with it, put it aside, and then have only now picked it up again recently. So I cannot for the life of me find the actual instructions that I used to draft those, but I will put some links in the description for very similar drafting methods. Even if it's not the exact ones that I used, it will be kind of very similar process. Also, in other news, I get to wear this brace. And guess what? It's because I've been doing too much hand sewing. So when I do a lot of hand sewing, I aggravate my carpal tunnel, and then my fingertips will start to go numb and the skin gets very dry, and it's just a lot of fun. And when that happens, then I have to wear my brace and try not to use this hand for too much. So that's really fun, side effect of doing too much sewing. But on the flip side of that, it does mean that I don't have to use a thimble when I'm sewing because I can't feel it in my finger when the needle pokes me. So that's probably not the best thing to do, but not gonna lie, I definitely do that. Anyways, let's get into the 1910s and start working on our corset and split drawers. This is my self-drafted drawers pattern for my 1910s combinations. So just the part from the waist down. The important thing to note with this pattern is that the interior here along this deep curved line is the front, and then this line here is the back. So this pattern has been drafted as if the two front and back are laying on top of one another. So I'm going to cut out the back side and then trace the inside and cut out a second copy for that. I think you're supposed to actually do it on a fold in your paper, but I messed that part up in the instructions. I stayed up all night drafting the pattern for my 1910s combinations. I used a period accurate drafting method for the drawers portion, so from the waist down, and I think those turned out pretty good. And I haven't decided whether I'm going to leave them open or closed. During the period, it was pretty common to have open drawers, and that makes it a lot easier to use the restroom while you're wearing your outfit because a corset goes over this. So I'm probably going to leave it open. I have it pinned closed in the front now because I still also need to figure out how I'm going to close it. I think it was accurate to have buttons, but I don't know that I want buttons underneath the corset, so I may put like a drawstring at the waist and maybe a couple just little ties here. And then the top was a complete experiment, entirely self-drafted, just flying by the seat of my pants, basically. And I think, all things considered, it turned out reasonably well. I have some little like gathers that I made in the front to give it just a little bit more roominess. You know, it's got, there's a little bit too much here. So I think I might take a little tuck in on the sides. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that this turned out. So now just need to finish the edges and make some small adjustments here. So I have my pattern pieces all laid out here for the corset. And I just want to show you guys a few things here. First of all, you can see the different cutting lines here. So there's a couple different views of this pattern or options that they give you to make. So you can see, you know, view A cutting line versus view B cutting line. I haven't decided which one of those I'm going to make quite yet. Now the other thing that I need to do is shorten these. I am very short and I always have to shorten any pattern that I buy, usually by at the least 2 inches. Now this pattern does give a line to shorten, but what I'm a little bit concerned about is that that's just going to shorten the bottom. If you can see on this piece, the actual waist is here. They have a nice place where you're going to place your waist stay tape. And so I'm short, you know, not really in the area below my waist, but I'm short in the area above my waist down to my natural waist. So the area that I usually have to shorten things is actually at the waistline. So I'm a little worried that if I just shorten it here, it's not really going to do what I need it to do. So what I think I'm going to do is actually try and shorten it right here at the waist tape line. But here you can see all the pattern pieces. Ready to go. So this is what the pattern looks like after shortening it at the waist by 1 3/4 inches. All right, I think this is close enough to do a mock-up. I took an additional 1.25 inches out, I believe, from the waist, and it's looking a lot better. I think it still might be just a tad bit too long, but I don't want to take too much off and then have to add more. So I'm gonna make the mock-up and see how it is once it's on my body. Here is my mock-up of my 1910s corset. I've got like some extra fabric in the small of my back, which is pretty typical for how things fit me. I don't really exactly know what kind of adjustments I need to make there to fix that. This is the pattern that I have come up with after making many modifications to the original pattern. And I have laid it out here on my coutil to cut out. A couple things that I'm not quite sure about are on the pattern pieces that I modified heavily, especially the back one here. I'm not quite sure now what my line should be for lining it up on the grain of the fabric. So I've just kind of estimated here, you know, because this piece originally should have been like straight, but then I've moved the pattern this way a lot to account for my sway back. I don't know, there might be too much bias stretch on the piece now. And I'm also a bit worried that this will mess up the placement of the boning channels. Not sure how it's going to work trying to put boning in when the piece is skewed to the side like that. It fits me perfectly when I try it on. I mean, it results in, you know, a straight line down my back, but I'm just not sure how that will work with boning in it. Since I shortened the pattern, I needed to basically take my busk and mark out where on the pattern the closures lay. Next, I laid the two facing pieces down on the two front pieces of the corset. Then I transferred the markings for the busk placement to the fabric. The tabs for the busk need to stick out on the right hand side, so when sewing the facing down on that side, you sew in between those marked points for that busk placement. The other side of the busk is the side with the knobs, so you can just sew all the way down over the facing for that side. Then the busk gets slotted in between the layers. And make sure you don't forget to insert the waist tape so that that can get sandwiched between those layers as well. Using a zipper foot allows you to get as close as possible to the busk while sewing all those layers together. Then it's easy enough to mark the holes for the knob side of the busk to poke through by lining up the two pieces of the front corset. And then we take an awl and poke those holes so that we're spreading the fabric apart instead of punching a hole with them. And that makes it a lot stronger and less likely for the fabric to tear. We need to add our waist tape on this side as well. And then we use a zipper foot again to sew through all of those layers. Next, the facings get sewn onto the back as well. And then once sewn on, they are folded over, and then another line of stitching is sewn down, forming a sort of like pocket for a boning, or I guess a boning channel. Then another line of stitching is sewn, and this forms the space where the grommets will go so that we can lace up the back. And then after that, yet another line of stitching is sewn, and this will form another boning channel. So there will be grommets sort of surrounded by boning channels to provide that stability. Setting the grommets was actually kind of fun. So you use an awl to punch out the hole and then lay your grommets in. You can get a little tool to set them, and then you kind of just whack it with a mallet, and the two pieces of the grommet fit together onto one another. So with the busk and the grommets set, the next step is just to place right sides of fabric to right sides of fabric and sew up all the other vertical seams. Well, I've been sitting here trying to figure out why my lacing isn't working. Every time that I have tried to lace it up, somehow things don't align correctly. And then I had the thought, I wonder if I have the right number of lacing holes. Turns out, I definitely do not. So on this side I have 21, and on this side I have 22. And in order to lace this up properly, I need to have the same amount on both sides. So I'm gonna have to, I guess, add another one. Problem with that is the reason that I didn't think that I had a different number is because, like, at the bottom, they start in the same spot, and also at the top. Like, they're the same distance from the edge. So I've got to figure out exactly where I want to add this. Now, I have no idea how this happened because I used, like, my little ruler thing to try and evenly space these suckers, but obviously I messed up somewhere. Yep, this is where that, what is that phrase? Measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, set grommets once, kids. After fixing the grommet issue, I still wasn't happy with the fit, and I just got really frustrated with this project and let it sit for about a year. Well, I found the project once I had moved into my new place, tried it on, and thought, I must have been crazy because this kind of fits perfectly. Okay, so what we have here is the inside of the corset. This is the front edge. The seam allowance here has been pressed towards the back of the corset. The waist tape has been pinned down all the way to the end. And then I am using tape for my boning channel. I don't have like a true boning channel, so I'm gonna try to use tape. I'm hoping that it is gonna be wide enough. But essentially this is pinned in place, and what needs to happen next is I need to trim down this seam allowance, which I'm very, very nervous to do. And then I need to run a line of stitches down the center of this tape and then down each side of the tape. After sewing down the center of the channel, I realized that I needed to actually go back and trim the seam allowance on the inside so that it would be encased in the boning channel. Then I was able to sew the seams down on either side. Okay, I have finished putting in my boning channels. So you can see they run over the waist stay, and that just kind of is like floating free, secured down here. It was a little bit difficult to do just to get like because you sew from this side, so to get everything properly aligned was difficult, and I did mess it up right here. So I think I'm gonna go back and like hand stitch this down, just tack that down right there, And as you can see, I have inserted the bones, making sure that they curve inward towards the body. And that will just help with like the look and feel of the corset of the silhouette, because the tension of the corset against your waist will kind of like pull it in towards your waist, but there's not as much tension on the edges. So you want to make sure that those are naturally curving in towards the body so they don't sort of start to like curl up and poke away. We're getting so close. Now it is time to attach some pretty lace to the top edge of the corset. And this just gets stitched down to the top before that edge gets encased in cotton tape for the binding. This is the back crotch seam, so coming down from the back down into the crotch. And because these are open drawers at this split, I think I'm just going to try and like fold over twice and hem as you would hem like the bottom of pants. It's gonna be a little weird here, like I'm not quite sure how to handle this because it's going in the opposite direction. I think it's just gonna have to kind of be a little bit funky and weird at that meeting point. And it'll probably get weird here, which is the front. This is what the front outside looks like. And so yeah, here too, I'm gonna just kind of have to make it go the opposite way. Maybe clip into it a little bit here so that I have that space to fold it. Anyways, that's the plan. So here is what it looks like. I have hemmed the bottom, hemmed this a little bit here, and now I need to figure out what this top area is going to look like. So I think I am going to like make it a lot smaller so that it only comes up to here, because I'm not really sure what the neckline of what I'm going to be wearing on top of this is going to be. And I'm also going to make probably a petticoat and a corset cover as my next layers, and I want the top of this to be completely covered by that. So let's see. So I cut along the line that I had drawn with the pen and then folded it in half so that I could use that cut line to mark out the other side. After hemming that edge, all that was left to do was add the ties to the front.